Hey, this is Bernie Borges, host of the Social Business Engine podcast, along with my co-host Dayle Hall, Senior Vice President of Marketing at Lithium Technologies. Welcome back to this UpClose Podcast Series, the 5 most influential topics in B2B marketing. Now, this is the 5th and final episode of this series. And as a refresher, as I've been doing all along, I want to let you know what we've done so far. On episode 1, Dayle and I covered influencer marketing. On episode 2, we covered data overload and how to harness it. On episode 3, we discussed the digital customer experience is the new battleground. And then on episode 4, we discussed the state of social engagement in 2017. Well, Dayle, this is the 5th and final episode of this podcast series, and we're going to discuss the love story that is possible when sales and marketing get aligned in an organization. And as you know, Dayle, this is one of the biggest challenges that any brand faces. It's also one of the greatest opportunities that all brands face. So let's wrap it up by giving the listeners some insights into how this love story can really be achieved. And so I'd like to actually open it up with starting with the C-suite. Okay? Because as you know, the C-suite has a great opportunity and even a responsibility to educate and inspire others in their organization on the role of social. Now, of course, they need to be educated and inspired on the role of social. So if we teach them how to engage, this way they can lead by example. And there's some great sources, great examples of that. One of my favorite is Jeffrey Immelt, who is now the former CEO of GE. I think he's actually still there, but he's announced his retirement. He has been an engaged CEO. So he's led by example at a very large organization. In fact, he's highlighted in Charlene Lee's book, The Engaged Leader, Strategy for Your Digital Transformation. So starting with the C-suite, I think that's a great way for any brand to really begin to align marketing and sales.
Yeah, I think the best example I can add to this is to really talk about what we do at Lithium. And at Lithium, we always include the C-suite, but I recognize it's definitely hard to start there. So to some extent, I also believe you need to prove some of the initial value before you really start engaging with them. And we talked, the previous episodes of this, we've talked about how to get more visibility, how to link to get more ROI. So I think if you can start showing some of that, then you have the authority, or actually you have the responsibility to now bring in the C-suite organization. Because I think the more you include them, the more they're willing to take a few chances, and you'll probably get more budget. You'll certainly get more visibility in the organization. So the way I look at engagement at Lithium is through a couple of unique ways. First of all, we look through 2 business lenses. One is revenue and one is reputation. Social and social media management and social marketing falls into those categories very well. So from a revenue perspective, you can use social and social lead generation and link it to your other demand gen efforts. It can be an activity that you use in addition to paid digital ads through engagement from webcasts and so on. There's a way to link your social strategy and your social execution directly with those other marketing activities. So you can show, as it links through your CRM, you can show how it potentially impacts pipeline, therefore hopefully impacting revenue. And then secondly, reputation, building reputation through social media and having known and a consistent presence on all channels and be able to respond quickly, those really enhance your reputation. And I think you're seeing that with brands today, in that the more a brand engages and the more it shows that it's listening, the better the reputation. And I use John Ledger from T-Mobile as an example. You talked about Jeff Immelt. Well, John Ledger, if you've seen him online, he is a vociferous brand advocate. Not only is he a brand advocate, he is aggressively competitive on social. So I don't think anyone can tell me that that is not having a positive impact on his brand. And I know for a fact that when he does his analyst calls, I read about this in, it was Harvard Business Review, there was a big article on him. He actually does his quarterly calls when he does his earnings. He has a social command center where he's seeing what's going on social channels as they're doing their earnings calls. I mean, he's there tweeting, his other colleagues are there tweeting, and he wants to know. He's using social as a weapon to make sure that once this data is out there, it's being promoted, it's being used in the right way. So clearly revenue and reputation definitely collide from that perspective. And then one other thing that I should mention is, I've talked about this in the past, make sure you get visibility. Not just visibility with the C-suite when they're having, e-staff meetings or board meetings. Get it on a day-to-day basis. That doesn't mean you always have to go meet with them to present to the C-suite on a daily basis, but monitor walls, shared dashboards, get those performance metrics out and in the open and start sharing those. Because if it's not, it is truly a case of out of sight, out of mind for the C-suite.
So, when we talk about aligning marketing and sales, certainly getting the C-suite to lead by example is one of the most impactful ways that the sales organization can really be inspired and can really enable the marketing and sales organizations to work more closely together. But another one that I want us to discuss is content strategy. When a brand develops a content strategy that has direct benefit on the sales organization because the marketing team has invited the sales organization into the content strategy development, then typically there's a greater chance of that content strategy being really effective for the sales organization, and that the content is not a one-size-fits-all, as I like to say, because the buyer's journey is not linear, and the buyer, according to CEB, there's 6.8 people involved in every B2B buying decision. So the content strategy needs to speak to all the different personas across the entire buyer's journey. And for the marketing department to be so cavalier, if I may say, to think that they can just do it on their own without engaging the sales team, and I don't mean every salesperson, of course, but the team collectively at some level, and participating or getting contribution from sales. And it can be as simple as, hey, what are the most common questions that you hear from customers and prospects? And then developing a content strategy that speaks to each phase of the buyer's journey, and then documenting that strategy and getting sign-off from the sales organization so that when it's implemented, sales was a part of it, and it wasn't just a marketing initiative, it was a marketing and sales initiative. Your thoughts on that, Dayle?
Yeah, I would say there's probably a number of marketing professionals that listen to that first line you just said about marketing inviting sales into the content process. They probably just had a big shudder because I think initially as a marketer, you want to engage with sales, but there's always this sense of it's never the right thing. You never do it in the right way. But I know at Lithium, the mantra at Lithium within my team, within the sales team is, everything the marketing team do should impact sales. That's what I've told everyone. Sometimes it's painful, but literally that is the baseline. So content strategy, personas, market, challenges, how to create differentiation. We can't do all that ourselves. We can't read a report and think, okay, I know exactly how to position the product. You've got to get it out there with the sales team, and the sales team can have the biggest impact actually on the content you create. So we work closely specifically with sales we actually assess specific themes and campaigns that we know will drive traffic and engagement and clicks and downloads, whether that's from the top of the funnel to the bottom, through things like emails when you're trying to really convert them at the last stage of the funnel. We make sure we listen to QBRs. We're part of sales performance calls so we can identify challenges and issues that they're seeing and maybe create content around it. And when I say we're part of QBRs, of quarterly business reviews, I mean my entire leadership team is in the quarterly business review, whether that's field marketing head, demand generation, content creation, marketing ops. All of them are in there so they can identify some of the challenges that sales team are finding. And basically at the same time, we also, marketing runs weekly and bi-weekly demand gen meetings. So these are things that we ask for that kind of feedback. We look at what's performing, we look at what assets are performing, and then we ask the sales team to provide, like, where do you think it's missing the mark? Where is this asset? Where do people drop off within the asset? Like, what else can we do to make it more successful? And then we also, one of the things that we do with sales, we actually run and attend large and small events. Sometimes they're actually proposed by sales, and they actually get the opportunities to suggest the right kind of events. It's not necessarily content strategy, I suppose, but it's really making sure that we create the right content for the events that they want to attend. So I would say it's not easy, but you've got to be open to it, and I think if you do it right, it can have a big impact.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're doing it right, Dayle, for sure. So let's now take that to the next level. Once you've created content that is going to give the sales organization valuable content assets that they can use and benefits them in their sales process, now we want to make it easy for the sales organization to utilize it, to participate. So we want to give them training on how to share content, provide the tools that make it easy, and even gamify it to make it fun, and just always be looking for those alignment pillars, those alignment metrics, so that they always understand that everything that's coming out of marketing is to support the sales goals. So you want to speak to that and how you're doing that at Lithium?
Yeah, and I would say sales enablement, I think, I know we're not going to do it in this episode, but what's hot on the runway right now, what's really hot is sales enablement. And I see companies today, and that's true at Lithium too, where we're really looking at how we can make it easier, the content we create for sales to utilize it and actually be part of it. And we've started running things, if we're trying to develop more content or get more people for webcasts or something like that, we are gamifying that with our sales team. Like, whoever adds the most on a certain period of time, they get incentivized for that. And I think that's critical. I mean, these are salespeople. This is kind of this is their bread and butter. This is what they live for. So we're also doing things like we provide basic or in-depth content around customers and their successes within our products. So anything from a blog to an ebook or annual customer awards, we make sure that when those things are available, we communicate it. We do it on sales calls. We send emails. We give them scripting to be able to use with it. We give them the key positioning points. And I think that's one of the critical areas. You can't just send an asset to a salesperson and expect them to fully understand. Well, okay, let me take a step back. You can't expect them to read it initially, let alone fully understand it. So you've got to make it easier for them. And giving them certain types of points and scripting, whether you're in sales development or business development, those I think are really key areas. And one of the other areas that we really focus on, we're integral to things like any kind of sales meetings and sales kickoffs. The demand gen meetings I talked about, we invite sales feedback on everything we do. We don't always see eye to eye, but at least there's a dialogue. It's okay to have a constructive dialogue around what marketing is doing, what's performing well, because, again, our job is to enable sales, and we only do that by having that dialogue and making sure that it's easy for sales to participate.
Yep. So, as we're having this conversation, there's a lot of things running through my head on this whole topic of aligning marketing and sales. And of course, reporting and data is one of them. And so sharing the data with sales that they care about is one way to contribute to alignment between marketing and sales. So there's a lot of data that we marketers look at and produce that probably, they would roll their eyes. I mean, they just don't need it. But if we can provide data to stakeholders across the management, the C-suite, as well as the sales leadership and sales team members, so that they can understand what content is actually moving the needle, what content are people succeeding with, what content was used to close the deal, what content was used to break into an account, what content was used to, overturn a competitor, things like that. Though data points that actually speak the language of the sales organization is the kind of data that we want to be sharing.
Yeah, I would wholly agree, and I think you don't necessarily have to create a lot of data that all sales have to see and align to. Some data can just be for marketing to use, but there is an element of making sure some things you do surface to the sales team, and we talked about earlier, surfacing it to the C-suite. So at Lithium, our mentality is actually your number is our number, right? So we show marketing generated pipeline, we show the targets, we show the goals, right alongside the sales team's targets and goals for pipeline. We also show how marketing assets and campaigns have helped to close deals, and we set ourselves benchmarks saying we want to be a certain level. We want to make sure that we don't fall behind in this. Now that doesn't mean to say sales are not responsible for a certain amount of closing things themselves. Yeah, of course they are. So are events, digital channels, social channels, field marketing. It all contributes, but as a marketing team, we make sure we surface all the data which actually sales care about, like how are we really impacting them and their business. And all that stuff is reviewed on quarterly business reviews, as well as what's closed. It's not just pipeline, it's what's closed too. And we're all gold on the same results. Marketing is right there with sales on their goals. And I've mentioned this a bunch of times. I don't think I can shout it any louder. The data has to be visible. We have shared dashboards. We publish that around the office on monitors, and we broadcast where we are through the quarter. It's all transparent. It's right in front of people. And I think what that does, it stops the little side conversations with salespeople in corners saying marketing aren't helping this quarter. It's very clear what marketing are doing, right? And I think that kind of trust and respect is actually what drives you talk about a love story. I mean, I think that would be an ideal, but I settle for mutual respect or admiration in the first instance.
Yeah, great insight. So let's talk about a few brands that are doing it well, that are doing marketing and sales alignment really well. I'm just going to rattle off a few brand names here. Now, no coincidence, Dayle. These are brands that have been on the Social Business Engine podcast at one time or another. And so I'll just briefly mention who they are and what they're doing. We've got Ansys is a producer of simulation software. Indium Corporation is a manufacturer of industrial solder paste. Thomson Reuters, of course, they do business services across a variety of different news items. And then Deloitte, of course, is pretty well known for their consulting and accounting practices. Now, what they all have in common is they have a very technical employee base that are subject matter experts. And what they all have in common is that their marketing organization has done a great job of educating employees across the employee rank and file, not limited to sales, but including sales, on how to engage with their content and how to do it in a way that is a brand ambassador. And in similar ways, marketing is communicating to sales what their impact is so that they're not operating in silo. In fact, they're operating very cohesively. Now, another example that I'll mention quickly is GoDaddy. I think a lot of people know the GoDaddy brand. They've actually gone through a rebrand recently, and one of the things that they focused on is integrating all their customer service people into essentially a marketing role, not necessarily giving them a title of marketing, but simply acknowledging that they are the ones that touch the customer. So by internally doing things that are pretty similar to what you described at Lithium Technologies, they've integrated customer service into that ambassador role. They even encourage employees across the entire organization to build their personal brand, and they actually help employees build their personal brand, recognizing that each individual, each employee at GoDaddy is not only a unique personal brand, but someone that can have a positive impact on the GoDaddy brand. So just a couple of examples, well, more than a couple of examples of some B2B brands that are succeeding with marketing and sales alignment. I think what we should do, Dayle, is because we're really at kind of the wrap point for both episode 5 and this 5-episode UpClose Podcast Series. Let's forego the What's in Style and Runway part of our episode. Why don't we, if I could ask you, do a recap on this love story that we've just discussed here, the love story of what happens, what's possible when marketing and sales are aligned.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good for this topic. I think the 4 areas we talked about, and I think all critical, all something that marketers really need to think about and get closer aligned with sales. But one of the areas is you start with the C-suite, and then look at that through different lenses. Look at it through revenue and look at it through reputation. Easy for me to say. Revenue that can come through things like social, through other digital channels and other demand gen efforts, and then reputation through things like social awareness, social response, social engagement, and making sure that you have that known, consistent presence across all channels, and that you really take it's not just about publishing. We've made that clear over this podcast series. It's about listening and engaging, not just publishing, what it is that you as a brand want to talk about. And I think from a revenue reputation standpoint, the C-suite cares about that. So that's the first point. Second point, content strategy. You can engage with sales and definitely engage with sales to make sure you can be a little bit more successful. Work closely with them to assess whether it's themes or campaigns or assets or whatever you think will help drive traffic or conversions from the top to the bottom of the marketing funnel. And then think about that as well in different formats, right? Different styles, different channels. Really think about customer journey and like what kind of asset, what kind of content works well on which channel. Treat them all as individuals. I know that's hard to do, but that's what's going to actually make an impact and move the needle. The third point, I would say we talked about make it easy for sales to participate. So, make sure that they can see the high-level content as well as the in-depth content. Make sure that they have what they need around customers. Basically, that can be any, and they can use any type of asset, but only when you include them do you really start to understand what they use the most. You'll also understand what actually is gonna move the needle for them. And make sure that you don't just announce an asset or a piece of content. You actually work with them to say, and here's how you should use it. Salespeople are very myopic. That's what you want. They want them to go and close deals or develop new pipelines. So a lot of the time they can't really bring everything in and really focus on every asset and say, okay, I really understand that. So just make it easy for them. And then I think finally, the data. Share the data. The sales number should be your number in marketing too. We plan together, we make sure we review status, we publish it, we're open with it. We'll admit if we're not doing that well that quarter, then we need to step up, we need to improve. And sales, I guarantee your sales team would love to help you, get better at that. It's not about apportioning blame. It's more about saying, how can we get better? Because if marketing achieve more, if we share the data where we are, if marketing get better, then so do sales. So I would say those are the 4 key points around really bringing the marketing and the sales engine together.
That's a great recap, Dayle. Thank you so much for bringing that love story together on marketing and sales alignment for B2B marketers. Well, Dayle, before we exit out of episode 5 in this entire 5-episode podcast series, the 5 most influential topics for B2B marketing, I'm going to ask you, give my listener the main key takeaways from this entire 5-episode series.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So you can go back and listen to them, but here's what I would say is kind of the synopsis of all of them. So first of all, UGC is making a comeback. It doesn't cost a thing to use authentic content from your fans or customers, so use it. All it costs is time to create and build those connections. Second, brands are starting to figure out that it's critical to integrate transactional data, social data, and behavioral data. You've got to do more than just one lens when you're looking at what a customer is looking for to get the full customer picture. Then I would say, for the third point, the only differentiator for brands these days is experience. People can always copy a product. Brands are starting to figure out that they'll win with the experience they deliver. That's the place for true differentiation. And then finally, just do better. Be better than Crocs. do better than the free tools and the poor reporting that you may have today. Social engagement strategy and what leads to a better social engagement. You need a scalable platform to be successful. You need to be prepared for that crisis. You can't always control it, but you need to be prepared for when it comes in.
Fantastic. Well, Dayle, I have enjoyed this UpClose podcast series. I've learned from it, as I knew I would. So I want to thank you so much for co-hosting this UpClose podcast series, the 5 most influential topics for B2B marketing.
Thanks, Bernie. It's been fun.
Hey, as we close out this UpClose podcast series, I want to encourage you to download our Social Business Journal Volume 10. It's a white paper style hybrid of my conversations with Dayle Hall on all 5 episodes, and it includes bonus content. Now, if you want to share this podcast series with your boss or your staff, remember that you can get all 5 episodes in one recording. I've actually heard stories of marketing teams that gather together in a conference room in a lunch and learn setting to listen to our UpClose podcast series as a group. It's kind of like attending a course in B2B marketing without leaving your office. Now, both Social Business Journal Volume 10 and the single recording version of this UpClose podcast series are available for download at socialbusinessengine.com. Hey, on behalf of my co-host Dayle Hall, Senior Vice President of Marketing at Lithium Technologies, along with special thanks to Francisca Fanucci and Kelly Sullivan at Lithium for all their assistance. And of course, thanks to Megan Alvarado on my team at Vengreso for waving many magic wands in podcast post-production. And thanks to Meyer Barron for his editing magic on Social Business Journal. This is Bernie Borges, CMO of Vengreso and your host of the Social Business Engine podcast, wishing you continued success on your social business journey.